2 uniformed cops pulled up to my garage in a patrol car, and I watched them quietly from underneath the lift. It was odd seeing officers who looked that cheerful, but as they got closer, their faces turned serious. They asked for me by name and delivered some terrible news. Something had happened at my house, and my wife was now in the hospital. They couldn't go into specifics. I tried to head out immediately, but they stopped me, needing to ask a few questions first. They wanted to know where I'd been for the past 3 hours. I told them I'd been at the garage all day and suggested they check with my 2 mechanics, Mike and Pete, to back that up. I did mention, a little sheepishly, that I'd slipped out for 10 minutes around 11 a.m. to grab coffee for the team. While one officer spoke with Mike and Pete, the other jotted down the name of the coffee shop I'd gone to. Then he asked if I'd mind showing him my truck. I didn't hesitate, told him it was parked right outside. He gave it a thorough look over before finally telling me I could head to the hospital. At the hospital, a nurse gave me a quick rundown of Kate's condition. She'd lost a lot of blood, had already needed a transfusion, and was in surgery. The staff member seemed oddly upbeat, even smiling a bit while explaining everything, which rubbed me the wrong way. It just felt out of place, considering the situation. As I was leaving, those same 2 officers stopped me again. They had more questions. We sat down in the hospital cafeteria over some much-needed coffee. They wanted to know about my relationship with Kate. I told them we got married 8 years ago, kind of late in life. Kate had been a successful attorney, really career-driven, and she didn't want to start trying for kids until she was almost 40. They asked why she was home on a weekday. I explained that Kate had quit her job just a month earlier. She wanted a break, a kind of pre-maternity leave, I guess, some downtime before what would probably be a decade of full-time parenting. I ended by saying I loved her deeply, that we were in a good place, and we were excited to start a family. Then they brought up a name I didn't expect, John Barton. I told them I didn't know anyone by that name. They didn't answer, just got up and walked away. Trusting my crew to lock up the garage, I went straight home. But it was already crawling with people, 2 forensic techs and a detective. The detective introduced himself, explained what they'd found so far, and then started in with the same questions I'd already answered. But he added one more. He asked about some drops of blood they found in the downstairs bathroom. I told him I had no idea what that was about. Then I asked why they were focusing on me. I needed to know they were looking into other leads too. He assured me they had multiple angles they were working, and that his partner was currently speaking with Mrs. Barton. That name again. John Barton. I asked who he was, but the detective just shook his head and said he couldn't talk about it. They left me standing there, confused as hell. I went upstairs to our bedroom and just looked around. The whole scene felt surreal, like I was watching a crime show on TV. But it was real, this was my life now. That morning, around 10 a.m., I'd been at work when my thoughts started drifting toward intimacy. Nothing unusual there. Apparently guys think about sex about 67 times a day. And when a man hasn't been close with his wife in over a month? That number probably doubles. Ever since Kate left her job, our sex life had tanked. What used to be 2 or 3 times a week had dropped to nothing. She always seemed moody, tired, or just plain down. I figured she was scared. Her whole life was changing. I got that. I didn't want to pressure her. I figured she'd come around when she was ready. I knew things would be different once we had kids, but for her, it'd be a total upheaval. Still, I found myself daydreaming about the early days of our marriage, how spontaneous and exciting our intimacy used to be. We made it a point to keep things fun, to try new things. But eventually, like a lot of long-term couples, we slipped into routine. Snapping out of my thoughts, I decided I needed to do something. I needed to shake things up. I'd go home early and surprise Kate. Maybe get close again. Really close. Just the 2 of us. I told Mike and Pete I'd be out for a bit. Pete asked if I could test drive the car he just finished, so I did. But when I pulled into our driveway, my heart sank. There was a car I didn't recognize parked there. A friend visiting, maybe? Whatever the case, it threw a wrench in my plans. Still, I figured I'd go inside and see what was going on. Maybe I could nudge whoever it was out the door without raising suspicion, and still salvage what I had in mind. I opened the front door, and instantly, every hair on my body stood on end. I knew right then, my marriage was over. The unmistakable sounds of passionate sex were echoing from upstairs. It was like a punch to the gut. Out of habit, I pulled out my phone to start recording. Back at the garage, I always filmed when clients dropped off cars, just in case they tried to blame us for damage. I guess in that moment, it felt like self-protection. My heart pounding, I crept up the stairs, phone in hand. I peeked through the crack in the bedroom door. And there it was, Kate, naked in our bed, with a guy I'd never seen before. They looked like they didn't have a care in the world. Just enjoying themselves. On our bed. I turned away before I did something violent. Honestly, that moment might have been the hardest thing I've ever lived through. My knees buckled, and I collapsed in the hallway, completely wrecked. They were still at it. I could hear them, lost in their little world, while I was falling apart just feet away. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time felt meaningless. Eventually, the noises stopped. Then came the talking, soft, casual, as if what they'd just done hadn't burned my life to the ground. That part somehow hurt just as much. I knew I had to get out of earshot. If I let myself react, I'd put that guy in the hospital, and land myself in jail. So I stood up, quietly crept downstairs, and collapsed onto the couch. I needed distance from the sounds, the smells, the betrayal. Once I was clear-headed enough to think, I did what I always did, I made a plan. First, I'd get that guy out of the house. Confront him. Toss him out the back door, ideally naked. Then I'd deal with Kate, alone, no bruises, no witnesses, nothing that could land me in court. Luckily, I had the perfect tool for the job. 2 years ago, in the Army National Guard, I'd been trained in vehicle inspections and came across a non-lethal device used in hostage rescues, a flashbang grenade. It was a small canister with a pin and lever, built to disorient rather than harm. The thing went off with a blinding light, 8 million candle power, and a deafening bang around 170 decibels. Just enough to stop someone in their tracks for a few seconds. I grabbed the device from my workshop, glued a short rope to it, and tied a loop at the end. My heart was hammering, but my focus was razor sharp. Back upstairs, I could clearly hear the second round in progress. More groaning. I retrieved my phone, still lying on the floor where I'd dropped it, and peeked around the door frame. Sure enough, Kate was going down on him. Still completely in it. My rage boiled, but I stayed calm. I was a man with a mission. I took a breath and walked into the room. I looped the rope over the hook beneath the ceiling light so the flashbang hung halfway to the floor. Then I pulled the pin, pocketed it, and walked out of the room. I pressed my fingers tightly to my ears and shut my eyes. Even through my eyelids, the flash lit up the hallway. The blast hit like a wave. Timing was everything. I burst back in, ready to make my move, and that's when I got the real shock. The guy was flat on his back, moaning, and something was wrong down there. Whether it was nature's curse or the grenade's fault, I couldn't tell, but there was definite damage. Kate was lying on the floor, her eyes wide and empty, her mouth working like a fish gasping for air. Stunned, I stumbled into the hallway. My mind spun, trying to process what I'd just seen. But before I could make sense of it, I heard 2 blood-curdling screams, then loud banging and doors slamming. That's when it hit me. I was in trouble. Big trouble. My plan had backfired. I peeked back inside. The guy had fallen out of bed, clutching his groin and wailing like a wounded animal. Kate was gone, probably in the bathroom. I needed to clean up. Fast. I dashed back into the bedroom, grabbed the flashbang's detonator from the rope, and stashed it. Everything else seemed ruined. I crept toward the bathroom, half dreading what I'd find. Kate was on her knees, puking into the toilet. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I just didn't care anymore. On my way out, something caught my eye, a soft, fleshy piece on the carpet. Warm. I picked it up, recognizing what it might be. It looked like the tip of a tongue. Without hesitating, I tossed it into the downstairs toilet and flushed. No way they were reattaching that. Trying not to make a sound, I slipped out the door and took off down the street, grateful for the distance between our house and the neighbors. 10 minutes later, I was halfway to the garage, dumping every trace of what had just happened into a roadside trash can. And somehow, I still wasn't sure if this was real life or a nightmare I hadn't woken up from. I was back at my little auto shop, trying to hold it together. I immediately called Pete and Mike, my 2 oil-streaked mechanics and longtime friends. They could hear something was wrong and rushed over without hesitation. As soon as they showed up, I asked them straight up if they could vouch for my whereabouts over the past 45 minutes. Without even thinking, they both said, "Of course, boss." But I held up a hand to slow them down. "Wait," I said. "Before you answer too fast, you need to know this might get serious. Like real serious. I might be looking at charges. Maybe even jail time." I didn't dive into details right away. First, I threw on an old pair of coveralls and wiped my hands and face with a greasy rag, just in case the cops showed up. Pete and Mike stood there, wide-eyed, as I quickly walked them through what had happened. Mike was the first to crack. He tried to hold in a laugh, made it maybe 15 seconds before bursting out. That was all it took. Pete followed, and within moments, all 3 of us were laughing so hard we could barely breathe. It was 5 full minutes before we calmed down. After a round of handshakes and swears of loyalty, they went back to work. Every now and then, I'd hear laughter echoing from somewhere in the shop. Even in the darkest moment of my life, these guys found a way to make me smile. Meanwhile, Kate was about to deal with the fallout she'd earned, the woman who had always acted too good to even say hi to the guys at the garage. That evening, I went back to the house and cleaned the master bedroom. I scrubbed the bathroom floor, tossed the bed sheets, and made a mental note to replace the rug. The curtains were torn, those had to go too. Keeping busy helped keep the thoughts at bay. The phone rang constantly. People knocked on the door. I ignored all of it. Just once, I opened the door and then slammed it shut. Then I turned my phone off completely. The media was already circling like vultures. A story involving adultery and a man losing his dignity? That was front-page gold. But I needed space. With things quiet again, I finally had time to reflect. Did I regret what I'd done? Weirdly, no. I've always hated cheaters. I've seen what it does to people, how it changes them. And before today, I would have sworn Kate was different. I thought she believed in loyalty the way I did. I was wrong. What really stunned me was her reason. Up until recently, I thought she was as devoted to me as I was to her. Our sex life had been great. Passionate. Consistent. Until it wasn't. 2 months back, I had a weird feeling when she told me she was retiring from work to enjoy her last days of freedom before we had kids. I thought it was odd. She always planned to work through her 7th month of pregnancy. But she said she just wanted one last celebration before motherhood. That line stuck with me. Just as I was lost in that memory, my personal phone rang. Not many people had that number. Caller ID showed Kate's parents. They lived a few hours away, still in state. I picked up. I'd always gotten along with them. Her mom skipped the usual pleasantries and went straight to the point. She asked if I knew why their house was surrounded by reporters. She couldn't bring herself to say what the reporters were there for, but she hinted. Then she asked if I'd seen the local news, particularly the headline about a woman who bit off her lover's manhood. Classic Kate's mom, blunt and colorful. "Yeah, Mom," I said, sighing. "Look, I'll just say it. That woman was Kate." There was a scream on the other end. Then the call cut off. I stared at my phone, which now flashed a low battery warning. It reminded me that not even 8 hours earlier, I'd recorded the death of my marriage. That phone had been left on and recording outside the bedroom door. I hadn't listened to the whole thing yet. I knew it would hurt. But deep down, I felt like if I didn't hear the truth, if I didn't understand why she did this, I'd never trust another woman again. I'd turn bitter. Alone. Miserable. So with a sliver of hope and a mountain of dread I hit play. The video started, just audio, mostly showing the ceiling from where I'd dropped the phone. No visuals, thank God. I couldn't hear much, so I transferred the file to my computer and ran it through an audio booster. Then, I heard it. Kate's voice. And his. "It was amazing, Kate," the guy said. "This past week's been incredible. Does it really have to end today? My offer still stands, just give me your word, and I'll divorce Sarah and marry you." Her response? "Well, yeah, I guess it would work. A great way to start a marriage, with a guy who left his wife and kids." She laughed. Then came the kicker. "No," she continued. "I love Dave too much to hurt him like that. Besides, he's a great husband. And he's going to be a good father." After everything, she still called me a good husband. Still believed I'd make a great dad. But she still did what she did. And I still had no idea how to live with that. "I'll be Mrs. Perfect now," Kate said, her voice low but clear. "A full-on housewife, at least until our youngest kid starts school." "You can't love him that much," the guy said. "He's not the one lying here beside you." "No, you're wrong," she replied without hesitation. "I love him with everything I have. From the second I met him, I knew he was my soulmate. There's no one else like him, and there never will be. I feel lucky every day to have a man like him, someone who pampers me, who'll take care of me when I'm big and pregnant with 2 or 3 of his babies. All I want is to grow old with him, surrounded by our grandkids, and die in his arms someday." "Well," the guy said after a pause, "that's a hell of a speech. But it raises a pretty obvious question. Why the hell are you here with me now?" For once, Kate was quiet. A long, heavy silence followed, maybe 30 seconds. "I guess I just missed the old days," she finally admitted. "I didn't get married until I was 31. Before that, I was a bit wild. I missed the feeling of walking into a bar and turning heads. The rush of being noticed. Flirting, teasing, then deciding in the moment whether some guy would get lucky or not." She paused again before continuing. "Lately, Dave's been going hunting with his buddies almost every other weekend. 3 weekends ago, I decided to take a little trip down memory lane. Went to a bar. Ended up having a one-night stand. It was okay. Nothing special. But then last Saturday, I walked into another bar, and there you were." The guy chuckled. "God, you're cold, Kate. But fine. Let's just call this the last hurrah, yeah? I mean, what's Dave even got to complain about, really?" Kmear. That was all I needed to hear. I muted the video. At least now I had some clarity. This wasn't about me. I was a good husband. A good lover. The issue wasn't something I did wrong. It was her. Her choices. Her selfishness. The next few days dragged by in a fog of bitterness and disappointment. 2 days after the media circus, the street finally cleared. Reporters packed up and left. I got a call from the hospital administrator. Apparently, Kate had asked for some pajamas. I declined. Let her keep wearing those ugly, awkward hospital gowns. Seemed fitting. 2 days after that, her dad called. He apologized for everything Kate had done and said he hoped we could still keep in touch. Then he tried to soften the blow by reminding me that his other daughter, Kate's younger sister, was recently divorced. Sorry, Dad, I said. That's just too weird. Then, a few days later, there he was on the news again, Mr. Casanova himself. Out of the hospital. Reporters had dug into his background and, surprise, surprise, uncovered a trail of affairs. He wasn't some poor fool led astray. He was a serial cheater. The same news story gleefully shared that, although the doctors managed to reattach his, well, you know, it was highly unlikely it would ever function again. I'll admit it, I smiled. I genuinely smiled. Then, right before the weekend hit, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Mrs. Barton, Sarah. She asked me to call her that. She was pretty, with tired, heartbroken eyes. She said she'd heard whispers that I might have some evidence, something that could help her in the divorce. I told her maybe I did. But I couldn't admit anything directly without risking trouble for myself. She understood, and she apologized for even asking. Still, I felt for her. The pain on her face, it was too real to ignore. I finally pulled up the video. Not the whole thing, just the aftermath, when the flashbang went off and the screaming began. Her husband's voice cut through the silence, raw and panicked. She flinched. Her hands went to her mouth. But then she straightened up. She didn't look too broken up when she left. Being the decent guy I am, I told her she could come back any time, if she ever needed company again when the sadness came back around. And well, let's just say that wasn't the last time I saw Sarah Barton. I saw Sarah Barton again not long after, but the last person who came to my door, that one took me by surprise. It was Saturday afternoon when I heard the knock. Standing there on my porch was the detective I'd spoken to the day everything went sideways. Gone was the suit, just jeans and a flannel shirt now. He looked more like someone's uncle than a homicide investigator. "Hey, son," he greeted. "Don't worry, I'm not coming in. Just wanted to say this real quick. I reviewed everything, and based on the evidence, or lack of it, I recommended we close the case." I thanked him, genuinely. He nodded, then turned to leave, but paused at the bottom of the steps and glanced back. "Listen," he said, almost smiling. "I'm retiring at the end of the year. But if I happen to drop by after that, will you tell me how you pulled it off?" I didn't answer. Just gave him a knowing grin and wished him a good day. That Tuesday, a letter showed up in my mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope stopped me in my tracks. It was from Kate. "My dear Dave, I can't begin to express how ashamed and sorry I am for what I've done to you. I understand completely why you haven't come to see me, and I don't blame you at all. I forgive you for that, fully and without hesitation. I never considered how far-reaching the consequences of my actions would be. I certainly never imagined my own parents would disown me. I know I've lost your love, your trust, and your respect, probably forever. And that thought breaks me in ways I can't even put into words. I'll understand if you never want to speak to me again. But maybe, just maybe, it might help you to hear my reasons, if only to give you some closure. Please just know, all of this is my fault. Every bit of it. The doctors told me I might never speak normally again. They think I swallowed the tip of my tongue when I bit it off. There's some experimental stretching therapy they've suggested. Maybe it'll help restore some speech. I don't know. I'm holding on to hope that I'll at least be able to return to my career someday. Something to distract from this dull, loveless, childless future I've earned. Whatever you want in the divorce, I'll sign. No arguments. Just one favor. If there's any way you could keep me on your health insurance for a while, I would be endlessly grateful. Goodbye, my love. I truly hope you find happiness in the future. I hope I haven't ruined your life completely. Yours, Kate, aka your cheating wife. The letter hit me hard. Harder than I expected. So yeah, I caved. I boxed up a set of warm pajamas and had them delivered to the hospital the next day. Then I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Where were Pete and Mick's numbers? I owed those two more than just thanks. I owed them a damn keg.